Hello and welcome to the third installment of the Island Symphony Orchestra's Artists for Artists, a series of virtual masterclasses for advanced amateur and aspiring young musicians. My name is Eric Stewart. I'm the music director of the Island Symphony Orchestra. And before we get to today's guest artist, I would like to thank the New York State Council on the Arts, the Huntington Arts Council, and Suffolk County for the grants and the public funding that make these virtual masterclasses possible. Today, we are very excited to bring to you trombonist Burt Mason. Burt is the principal trombonist of the Chamber Orchestra of New York. He is an associate musician with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and he is the founder of Ovation Concerts, which he will tell you a little bit about later. I've had the pleasure of working with Burt when we performed together a piece that I wrote, and it was an unforgettable experience. And I think you're going to really enjoy getting to know Burt. Welcome, Burt. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you.
All right. First, I had a couple of questions about how you started getting into playing the trombone, playing classical music. I was wondering if there's any pivotal experience you would say that made you decide you want to be a professional musician.
Yes, there is one pivotal experience that I could think of. That was in 2003, I believe. A group that I played with for several years, the New York Staff Band. It's a British-style brass band out of the Salvation Army. It's one of their premier bands. Got called to be the extra brass with the New York Philharmonic. They were premiering Shostakovich's Lady Macbeth with Maestro Rostropovich conducting. Wow. And that experience was, I tell people this all the time, probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had and one of the best. There are some things that happened in the rehearsal which I don't want to put out there, but things weren't that smooth during the rehearsal. You know, we pulled together and gave some great performances, and you know, at the end of it, you know, this was before I had done my master's in music at Manhattan School of Music, but that, you know, I think it was a 3-concert cycle, was so exhilarating. Just to be a part of that, you know, it made me really feel like, yeah, I need to go in this direction.
Wow. So it was a stage performance of the opera?
No, it was just the symphonic work, and you know, the orchestra was on stage, and the New York Staff Band brass. I think it was about maybe 12 of us in like the either first or second tier balcony,
okay,
up front. But the ovation that we got, literally for the balcony brass,
yeah,
kind of like Yankee Stadium. You know, I was
that's
just
awesome.
like, I think I could do this every night.
That's awesome. So I was going to ask you if there's any particular piece or, you know, certain repertoire that you heard performed or were performing, but that probably covers it. Are there any other pieces that, I guess, really when you were let's say after you decided, when you were thinking about deciding to become professional, if there's just certain music that you gravitated towards and you said, yes, this is the stuff that just makes me feel like I could do this every day?
Yeah, so just my quick evolution as a musician and trombonist. I could go into depth later if you really want, but so I started like in the Salvation Army brass bands, and then into my junior high and high school bands. So it wasn't, I think, until 10th grade where I sat in my first orchestra, and it was the all-county orchestra in Suffolk County. I think at the time it was called SCMEA. I don't know if they've changed the name or not. And that experience, you know, I think we played was it Polovetzian dances?
Oh, yeah.
And just hearing the woodwinds and the strings, I was just like, what is going on here? You know, I always tell people like, you know, like brass bands and wind bands are like black and white television, you know, and then you move into, you know, an orchestra, and then it's all of a sudden in color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then you get to like the great orchestras, and it's like 4K.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, there's so much great repertoire for that I love personally as I'm a hobbyist horn player, but I've always just gravitated towards music that has orchestral music that has great brass writing. And the one thing that I wanted to ask you about as an orchestral brass player, something I love hearing as an audience member, as a conductor, just when a brass section can find that perfect balance between that enormous sound that just blows you away, but it's still controlled and it doesn't become, too jagged or too uncontrolled. And I'm wondering, as a brass player, what what is the process of developing that sound, getting there, and finding that balance?
Yeah, so I mean, as a wind player, all right, so a lot of times we just say we're brass players, but we're part of the wind instruments. We're not woodwinds, but we're brass winds. So a lot of it has to do with breathing and just, you know, posture. And I go through all this with my students all the time. Um, some people do a lot of breathing with the tubes and all that stuff. I try and stay fit, so I get a lot of exercise, whether it's,
Mhm.
you know, running or playing basketball. Got to watch the chops with the basketball.
Okay.
Um, and, or lately I've been doing a lot of bicycle riding. So that helps with my air support. But
Yeah.
that's one of the big things is the air support that you provide, and taking in some good air, because you're gonna whatever you take in is what's going to come through the instrument. If you're taking in a lousy breath, you're going to get a lousy sound. So that's one of the main things. Obviously there's some technique things, with the core of your sound, but beyond that, when you talk about those epic, huge brass sounds that doesn't make you want to do the conductor thing and put up the hand, um, is listening. It's really listening. It's listening to your intonation, and listening to what else is going on, because sometimes, composers that really know what they're doing will double certain instruments to get that certain timbre. And you just have to listen. You have to listen to what's playing with you, what might be in unison with you, what might be in octaves. Obviously, you have to listen to the chords that are going on and where you are in the chord. But this is a lot of thing I tell my students is half the job is listening to your section, and the rest of the ensemble. If you don't do that, it's, all the time I tell my trombone players, if it's three or four of you in the section, you want to sound like one huge trombone. You don't want to sound like four trombones, especially if you're playing something in unison. You know,
Absolutely.
So I do some exercises with them where they have to listen. I'll have, um, sometimes I'll have them, like two students, one play one note, one play another note, and then I'll ask them, what was the other note that the person was playing? Can you
Mhm.
find it on your instrument? Or if some of the times they have perfect pitch, so they can tell you that. But just to make sure that they're listening to what the other person is doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to, I've discussed this with some other musicians that I talked to on here, just in different sections, the challenges of that particular sections may have of listening to each other, playing as a section while still being able to be with the conductor, follow the conductor. And with the trombone section, you're, usually all the way in the back. So it does sometimes provide or it does give you certain challenges with making sure that you're with the ensemble and you're with everybody. And is there any insight you can give as far as that goes? So let's say people who are playing in community orchestras or people who are young and playing with orchestras who they want to have the best be exactly with the ensemble but exactly with everybody in their section.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me when I was at MSM playing in, I forget, I forget which was, maybe it was the Chamber Symphony or something. We were doing Firebird, and
Hmm.
there's the one movement, the bass is starting on I think it's in 12/8, and the bass is do, 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 and then the trombones come in, on these rhythms, and you have to watch like crazy, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes anticipate, because the
Great.
sound, takes a little nanosecond to get through the instrument, and then it takes another little bit to get just to the conductor, and sometimes, so it's really using your eye and ear coordination to just stay right on top of things. Um, and that's what I've noticed. I tell again, I keep talking about my students, but sometimes they ask me, like at Juilliard, I sat in a couple times with the wind ensemble, right, just to see what my students were doing, um, and give them a little bit of guidance. And they always ask me, like the next time they see me, what did you think? And how does it feel? Like, what do you notice about it? And I say, well, the first thing not to demean them, is I can tell you guys are not listening to each other. You're not listening to pitch, because that's initially the first thing when I sit down with one of those, junior high or high school level wind ensembles, is the pitch. You know, playing the matter of the fill. They may screw up a rhythm or two, but generally the pitch is just they lock in right away. They're just listening. Um, so that has a lot to do with it. A lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also work with some choruses, and it's similar. It's the same thing. Probably I would assume, like you said, watching like crazy. Because if you're just listening, by the time the sound from the orchestra gets back to you, and then you play and you try to sync up with that, you're already late. And if you're a chorus that's playing behind an orchestra or a brass section in the back, it's exactly like you said, watching
Yeah,
and listening together.
yeah. I think uh, more than any other orchestral instrument, um, the brass and percussion, particularly the low brass, because they like to put us. Sometimes I think they'd rather put us in another room if they could. Um, but yeah, the brass and percussion are often in the back, and those skills become glaringly necessary to do. Listening and watching. You know,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now since you're going to be playing some music for us that's out of the solo repertoire, I'm curious your approach if you're working on solo instrument instrument pieces or solo playing versus orchestral playing, working on excerpts and that sort of thing. Is there a different approach you have, whether it's, I don't know, practicing either one, or just how you philosophically, I guess, look at the instrument in either case, or anything you'd want to talk about in that regard?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the process tends to be the same. In terms of there's always going to be something that you need to work on pitch-wise, rhythmically. You get the metronome out and the tuner out. I think probably soloistically, um, you end up moving away from some of those things in terms of like the metronome after a certain point, depending on the piece. But if you're doing something really romantic and it has a lot of rubato in it, you end up obviously being more expressive in the solo repertoire. And you know, I have to put this. I have to say this sort of with some caution,
Mhm.
because usually, even though sometimes solo, if you're playing with an accompanist, um, you know, attention is on you. And you have more ability to determine how you want to interpret the piece.
Right.
So the accompanist's job is really to listen to you. So we just talked, spent a whole thing about you have to listen and that, but
Right.
soloistically, you get to kind of bring out your inner diva a little bit,
Right.
versus orchestral, where you have to remain focused on where your part lies. So a lot of the time the trombone is the landscape in the back, providing broad chords,
Right.
or rhythmic heartbeat, um, and those kind of things. And occasionally they'll throw us a little bone with a solo line or a melody. Um, but you have
Or,
to kind of just,
yeah, I was gonna say, or you definitely get to be the diva in something like a Mahler 3,
oh yeah,
and
sure.
and then everybody just has to follow you.
Right, right, yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then so I was thinking, as far as solo repertoire versus orchestral repertoire. As you said, you have more liberty in the solo repertoire to, um, as far as your interpretation and your freedom within the meter and all of that sort of thing. And I guess I was wondering about, how would you say, first of all, I'll ask, how much would you say do you play orchestral versus solo? And just yourself personally, are you playing mostly orchestral these days, or a mix of both, or mostly solo? I know now we're in a stage where we're not no one's really playing anything, but under
Yeah.
normal circumstances.
Yeah, I was gonna say over the last 6 months, it's been really solo, like unaccompanied. But yeah, no, the last few years, it's really been a lot of
Mhm.
orchestral and some chamber orchestral, I would say, by far. When I'll just say back in the day now, when I used to play with the New York Staff Band, um, I was their trombone soloist, so I do a lot of soloing all over the place. Um, and then through MSM, it was a balance, through grad school, work
Yeah.
on solo rep and um, some orchestral excerpts and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been, yeah, by and large, more orchestral versus solo.
Okay. And I guess this I don't know if this is as when you go to the solo repertoire, is there anything you how do you make that balance in your head or that switch in your head where you say, now I'm going to be more free and more expressive versus now, is there anything you have to do to kind of, I guess, keep yourself from turning into an orchestral player? And since you do it so much while you're doing solo repertoire, or do you just kind of just take the moment and just like let
I
loose, just go for it?
think probably 98 to 99% of the trombone players will agree that uh, they're ready to take the soloist role whenever it. I mean, because we spend so much time, in the shadows, like,
Yeah.
kind of like the bodyguard or something, just standing by. So when somebody's like, hey, you want to do this? We're anxious, so we're ready for that. We spend
Yeah.
probably more time playing, the Grand Dal, ba-dum-bum-bum, ba-ba-bum-ba-ba-bum, or the David or something, to be ready to play that, even though we're probably not going to play it that often, as. But yeah, for a trombonist, um, yeah, we're ready to go in terms of desire
Uh,
to be a soloist.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me because I've spoken with some, let's say, pianists who are mainly chamber or musicians, and they'll talk about, oh, I just played with this orchestral violinist, and you know what? It's like they've got a metronome, ticking constantly in their head or something. So it's just interesting to know that, but that's probably the difference between playing in a violin section versus, like you said, being relegated to the trombone section where we not as many moments to shine, let's say, as of course as a violin section player.
Well, just to jump on that though, I mean, even in the orchestra, I think a lot of string players don't necessarily relate to this, um, but it is actually the trombone actually is a solo instrument. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the difference with in a orchestral situation, the conductor will say, "Okay, second violins, play me from measure 110 to whatever,"
Mm-hmm.
and anywhere from 8 to 16 people pick up their instrument, and it's
Right.
right? But if the same conductor says, "Okay, second trombone, I want to hear from measure 110," it's like,
Yeah.
okay, everybody's going to hear just me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
In that respect, it's actually very soloistic in the orchestra, because it stands out. It really does.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that said, we are going to listen now to two solo pieces, and why don't you introduce the pieces that you're going to be playing for us?
yeah. So the first one is Lahironama by Giovanni Cesare. So this was around the time of Gabrielli, and it's sort of in that canzone sonata feel, very, very baroque. And I played it on the sackbut, which you can see behind me here, which is very much like the trombone. It's the predecessor to the trombone. It's a baroque trombone, um, but also very different because the bell is in a different place than the regular modern trombone that we know. So yeah, this is the La Hieronima by Cesare. the next solo is the first movement of Schumann's Three Romances. This was not originally written for trombone. It was written for oboe, but a lot of different instruments have taken it and basically transcribed it. And I like the way it lays on trombone. It's a beautiful piece. So I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, now before we get into the third piece that you have to present to us, I would like to talk about the foundation that you have founded, the Ovation Concerts. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. Ovation Concerts is basically, its main focus is to foster balanced diversity. And by that I mean making orchestral music truly integrated. Over the years, the numbers haven't really moved in terms of African Americans, their representation in the symphony orchestra. And, through different things with live performances, with a truly integrated orchestra, not just all black musicians on stage or all minority orchestras, but a truly integrated orchestra. We look to do that. And then there's a educational residency that we take to colleges called The Untold Legacies of Black Composers. And we highlight some of the things that the history books have been missing for a long time, and challenge, musical institutions to incorporate this, the educational institutions, the colleges and universities, to start including some of this in their work and in their studies. One of the composers that I came across, African American composer, Pulitzer Prize winner, George Walker, wrote a trombone concerto. And it's pretty demanding, but it's really a really wonderful work. And I found it really special that he took the time to write a trombone concerto, someone of his caliber. So this is up next, the George Walker Trombone Concerto. One of my big regrets was not being able to have George Walker present from one of my performances of this. He passed away over a year ago,
Mm.
and one of the things I wanted to do, because I met him probably back in, I don't know if it was 2013, before I had all this going, and I was like, he was getting up there in his 90s, and I was hoping that I could do something either close to where he was living. I believe he was in New Jersey, in the New York area, maybe.
Mhm.
But anyway, to have him, in attendance, but unfortunately, that's not a possibility now.
Uh,
But yeah, he's also a very inspirational figure for me. In some of the things that he's done, his compositions. And that, as I mentioned before, is one of the focal points. Some of his work, as a more contemporary composer that has been decorated, with the Pulitzer
yeah,
Prize, but still is underrepresented all over the orchestral field. Uh,
yeah,
it doesn't get the just desserts. So
absolutely. I guess the only silver lining in all of this for somebody like me is it's exciting to know how much music is out there that I'm not familiar with, that I have to discover. And because discovering this music is, discovering great music is some of the most fun you can possibly have as a musician. So I think this can be an exciting time, and for everybody to embrace.
I agree. I think it's going to be an exciting time, but it's also going to be a time of, I'll just say, deep revelation. Um,
Yeah.
so in the longer video, where we discuss, the untold legacies of black composers, we also go into Joseph Boulogne,
Yep.
the Le Chevalier de Saint Georges, um, who is every bit as influential as Mozart, yet he's not in the history books. So we spent some time talking about that and actually some of the influences that he had on Mozart himself. And there's some eerie similarities, um, and some pretty interesting things that are revealed. Um,
Let's. I hopefully I'm not spoiling anything, but let's just say that the I performed with the Island Symphony Orchestra the Sinfonia Concertante for violin and viola a couple of years ago, and it was always one of my favorite pieces ever.
uh,
And to know that he may have lifted one of the main thematic, you know,
it's
things off of a composer who, as you said, has been basically completely neglected in the history books is a stunning thing. And I, I can only do so little for my part, but in my current orchestration class that I'm teaching, I played his piece right next to the Mozart just to start getting that out there.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah. In the longer video, we have a clip also of one of his violin concertos that was written, I don't know, several years before Mozart did his. And yeah, there's some other material that's lifted
Wow.
in Mozart's music. It's very staggering, let's just say.
Wow. So it's just the tip of the iceberg, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just with Saint George. Um, Another one, once you come forward a couple centuries, is William Grant Still, and
Mhm.
some of the things that you'll hear that you may have heard in Gershwin, and I think it's on IMDb. Some of the work that he's done, where he didn't get credit for, um, some of the he did some soundtracks and all that stuff. It's really fascinating study, that I'm hoping gets out of there, gets out there, I should say.
Yeah.
At some point very soon, and I'm trying to do my part to help that as well. So,
Great, great. Well, let's make it happen, right?
yeah.
I guess it's hard to talk about now with the current situation, but when things start getting up and running again, if that ever happens, as far as concerts and performances, are there any projects or you have planned with Ovation concerts? Any things that are on the, yes?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as the residencies, we're going to start really pushing that once things become somewhat back to the old normal.
Right, right.
You want to go out there and really interact with the students. I urge people to actually go to the website and watch the longer video. There's like a 20-minute interview that we have recapping the inaugural Untold Legacies of Black Composers at the Crane School of Music. We took it to
Oh,
myself
great.
and Kelly Paul Tompkins. Um, in the meantime, while we're still in this pandemic, I've been working on for like the last 5 years, a, a symphony, so call it an orchestral work, called the Symphony of Brotherhood.
Mm,
That's inspired by some words from Dr. Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech, where he wanted to transform the jangling discords of our society into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
hmm.
So from that larger work, I'm working on doing, I guess you could call it an excerpt. And I should point out that this orchestral piece is sort of like the Lincoln Portrait. It's a
Okay.
video, it's multimedia as well as the orchestral soundtrack. But I'm working on for very soon. Hopefully, I'll get it done within the next. We'll keep fingers crossed for the next 4 weeks. An
Uh-huh.
excerpt from that call for the Brotherhood. Um, and I have a lot of that music already done. I'm really excited about it. Um, and hopefully sort of record different musicians coming in and on their own one by one, because that's kind of how we have to do it. We can't really put a symphony on the stage yet, but sort of piecing it together. It'll take some technical wizardry, but
Yeah.
uh, I'm really excited about that. So keep an eye out for that release for the
All right.
brother.
Great. Do you want to say something about young musicians playing who want to play professionally?
Sure, yeah. Um, Yeah, so for young musicians that have their sights on being a professional and making music their profession, and people want to pay you to play,
Hmm.
um, it's never too soon to get your routine together, right? Being successful, I think, in almost any discipline, whether it's music, athletics, um, or academics, um, it's putting together a proper routine that gets you to the next level. So, I mean, obviously, you hear people, the overused cliche, practice makes perfect. Um, you have to practice every day, especially if you're a brass musician, right? The brass instruments are a little unfair because the muscle memory in this embouchure area is not very long. It's almost like fish memory. um, you don't play for 2 days and it starts to go away, and then if you don't play for a week, it's detrimental. Um, so consistency. Make sure you do your warm ups and your long tones and that kind of stuff. Um, but nowadays, there's so many tools out there for you to use. Like this thing here, this little cell phone thing. It's scary to me. It, it kind of runs your life sometimes.
Yeah.
But the resources that are available on it, you can use it for good, not only, not only evil. But
Absolutely.
I mean, you have YouTube on here, which can be a free resource. You can listen to anything. Your metronome is on here. Your tuner can be on here. Um, and I tell my students, you know, if you haven't listened to this piece, you're doing yourself a great disservice,
Hmm.
because when I was young, I'd have to go to the library and either rent oh boy, I'm going to really date myself now, rent a tape cassette or a
Yep.
record, or a CD. Now you guys just, oh, let me download this MP3 off of whatever, Spotify or Apple Music or Panda or
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so use those resources, and the when you do have a gig, whether it's a paid or unpaid, you treat it with the same level of professionalism as you would a paid gig at the Met or at the New York Philharmonic, right? You show up on time, You be cordial to your colleagues, your musical colleagues, um, and you practice and come in prepared. And trust me, if you do those things, um, opportunities are going to open for you. People notice good musicians that are easy to work with. You don't want to put a reputation out there that, oh, this guy, he's good, but I don't want to work with him because he's hard to work with, or she is great, but just has an attitude and thinks, that nothing else matters except her part. You don't want to be that person, right? So, um, and it's a very small musical world,
Yep.
right? The degrees of separation, you heard of probably 6 degrees of separation. It's really not that. It's a lot less, maybe 3 degrees, sometimes less, and the way media is now, social media and, just technology, good things get out there very quickly. If you've nailed something or did something, gets out there very quickly. Unfortunately, bad things get out there even quicker. Right? Word of mouth, particularly when it's something bad that happens, people, for whatever reason, tend to circulate that a little quicker than good stuff. So,
Yeah.
just be the consummate professional all the time.
I think that's the best advice you can give because in all the circles I walk in, I can't tell you how many times people, they just come in because somebody loved working with them. I loved working with them. I've had people invite me to do things. They just they just may know a little bit about me, but we've had coffee and then they just want to work with me because we had a good interaction. So I mean, it's so important just to, like you said, present your most professional, most cordial, most, that people remember that. People remember the people they like working with. And
Yeah, agree 100%. Yeah, and first impressions are very important. They
ab-
last a long time.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, now it's time for us to get to some live question and answer. Here we are. So one of the first questions that actually came up was about, you mentioned Joseph Boulogne and the piece that he um, basically took from Mozart, or Mozart took from him. We performed it with the Island Symphony Orchestra. It was a Sinfonia Concertante for violin and viola, and the theme I remember was something like da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee, and it came basically directly from, I think, Bologna's Opus 11, number 2, first movement, which he also used as an overture for an opera he wrote, called The Anonymous Lover. So right from Bologna into Mozart's pen and into one of the most famous pieces, and took it right from this composer who was, remind me, what was Joseph Bologne's ancestry, if you.
Yeah, he was born in Guadeloupe. His mother was a slave. His father was a French nobleman. He was born in the Caribbean island of Guadeloupe, and then his father took both he and his mother to France to be in the French court.
Mhm.
Well, for Joseph to be in the French court, his mom was put up elsewhere because she wasn't allowed to be in the French court. And yeah, there's a lot of things that happened subsequently with that. But
Yeah.
just to follow up on that, there are several works because I'm just urging all viewers, go to ovationconcerts.com. Right on the homepage, you'll see a video that we recorded that has some of this in there. And there's a line in his violin concerto. I think it's the E major concerto. I think it's Opus 5, number 2. I think it's on there. And there's a line where it's literally taken and transposed down a half step, but it's the same line. Um, and we discussed that in depth on that video. And then there's some other things, some other resources that people that are interested in that can check out as well.
Okay, great. Yeah,
But
go to Ovation Concert.
definitely not just one work.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I mean, one work is enough. It's such a famous work, and to think that it goes way beyond that. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
So
And
now,
I'm
yep.
sorry, just to clarify, because I saw questions asking what did Mozart steal from George Walker. That didn't happen because there's like 200 years separating.
Right, right. Not George Walker, Joseph Bologna.
Yeah.
Okay, now I had a question um, about a brass question about technique. As somebody who plays as a hobby, when you go into even especially when you go into higher registers, and the thing that I think is incredible about your playing is just the way the tone is always just so full, so rich, so controlled, and each note, just the way you connect your legato is incredible. And we talked a little bit about air support, and I also wanted to know, because I know from from my experience or lack of experience, it's not only the air support, it's also a lot in the embouchure just to keep everything in harmony so that you can create that sustained and legato tone that's even and all the notes speak the same. Is there any exercises for, let's say, embouchure to keep that sound just controlled and steady?
Yeah. Well, just keep in mind though, yes, the embouchure and the aperture. I talk about the aperture a lot also. You just want unrestricted airflow right up to the aperture from way down here in your diaphragm bowels area, basically. Unrestricted. A lot of people end up tightening up here. I learned that you just have to keep your throat open, even when playing high. It might sound counterintuitive, but it works when you're doing it right. It works, and it works very quickly and very. I don't want to say easily because you have to do a lot of training to play up there, but don't depend too much on, you know, pressing in and that kind of stuff because you'll get fatigued and you can damage muscles. The higher you play, the faster the airflow. All right, that's the one thing, and it has to be unrestricted. The minute you cut something off anywhere in there, your sound is going to get cut off. The lips won't vibrate, and you know you're dead in the water. So,
Okay.
for sure.
And and another thing along those terms, when we're talking about the embouchure breath as well, I I conduct a course and I have my own, I guess, what would you say, images that I try to evoke about how airflow should be. And are there any that you like to tell your students, or to just ideas of how to imagine the air? Like you said, it comes from deep within your gut. It has to come from deep, and to keep the airflow going, are there any images you use to kind of
Some might not be pleasant if I quote a certain principal trombone of the New York Philharmonic, because he sometimes says it's almost a feeling of like you're defecating. But that kind of strong support down here. Um, I like to, because I know one of the things that sometimes I used to do, and I like to think I do it a lot less now, um, is get the air kind of choked up in here, like if you're basically getting choked. So I think of a hot potato in my mouth to keep the throat open, keep the mouth open, and those are the kind of things I think of.
Okay, I like that one. That one's new to me. I've never heard that one. Hot potato. Okay, here's something that I was thinking about more since you're playing on a sackbut for one of the pieces. Is how much is your interest in historical performance and performing with historical instruments? Do you perform at all with historical instrument ensembles? Do you do much of that?
Uh, I've done a lot of the music, but not. This is my first endeavor on the sack butt. So let me just give some credit really quickly for the first video that we played. Um, so this sack butt I borrowed from a good friend of mine, Mark Prachinsky, um, and on the surface it looks like a lot like the trombone, but it's different. And because normally the trombone, we use the bell as our reference point sometimes. I tell my students don't touch the bell if there's any students that are watching this, not to touch the bell with your finger. But um, we get used to the bell being right around third position. And the thing on this, the bell flare, even though it's not much of a flare, is in fourth position. So it's really a trick of the mind. You have to really just listen. I was trying to practice it a lot, just closing my eyes and just listening because it's so different. That's just that little difference in the location of the bell flare. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it could really throw you off.
So yeah, this is the first time you guys got to see the first time I've ever played a Baroque trombone. I'm not fond of the name sackbut, but it comes from the French, apparently to push and pull with the slide. Um,
Okay.
yeah, but in the English translation, it's not very flattering.
Yeah, it's kind of it's more of a punchline than an instrument.
Right.
But anyway, the and here's a question about when you go into, maybe it's the same ideas, but when you go into your, especially in your higher registers, when you use vibrato, are there techniques the way you think about vibrato? Because that was it when you played the Schumann, it was just so vocal and so, and it's so natural always. Just curious how you think about it.
Um, I don't think that much about it. In that style, I do probably a little more breath vibrato than any jaw vibrato. Definitely no slide vibrato. That's actually, so I'm sorry. Let me jump back just to credit the first, because I don't want to forget this because these people helped me out a lot. So Mark Prachinsky I credited for the loan of the sackbut, and Victoria Shields was the organist in that first video. In the Schumann, my pianist Sakura Myers, who's a good friend of mine from Manhattan School of Music, we actually joked about that with the vibrato. She's very musical, and helped bring out a lot. I mean, that was a great collaboration. And we joked about like using a little slide vibrato and stuff. But yeah, I just think vocally, I try and sing and hum a lot of the music that I'm playing, particularly that one. I mean, it's so lyrical. That particular piece does a lot of on its own. I mean, it's just some great writing. That's why I chose it. I fell in love with that piece, and it works well on several instruments other than the oboe. Um, but yeah, I try and think vocally. That's one of the things. If you ever hear any of the great instrumentalists, just speaking like trombone wise, uh, you know, um, any of them, Joel Essie, Christian Lindbergh, even some of the people that we know more just for symphony stuff, Michael McCahey or Nitzan or Weston Sprott. I mean, there's a lot of them that just play at this level, and when they play, you forget that they're playing a trombone. You
Yeah.
just hear music, and that to me, that's like the greatest compliment and the greatest thing that you can achieve. Being an instrumentalist and being a trombonist, it's just like people are just listening to music and listening to that voice. It's no longer just a trombone. So that's kind of what I do. I think I pretend that I'm a tenor on the stage of the Met, and things come out
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Okay, here's this is a little, maybe a little more of a brass nerd question. So Mahler 3 solo, vibrato or no vibrato?
Well, it depends on which movement you're talking about or which passage.
Sorry, first movement solo.
Very, very little vibrato.
Okay, yeah, I've heard it done both ways. Just curious from and here's another question which I'd be curious your take. In a lot of orchestral repertoire where you have just trombones playing, when they're more of a fortissimo, big sound, there's not much space for vibrato in that type of, or is there? Because I'm curious, can you do vibrato when you have a gigantic fortissimo sound, or is that pretty much
No, so
straight?
no, yeah, no. I mean, a lot of the orchestral stuff we don't do vibrato. When it's
Hmm.
section, you just try and match your sound, and it's a straight pitch.
Yeah,
There's really no vibrato happening at all. You just want those chords to be blended and right in tune and lock in. You're not going to really achieve that if everyone is doing vibrato. Uh,
right, right.
Certain ring that happens when the chord is in tune. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I don't want that every time, especially in like chorale stuff, or if you're in unison or octaves. There's no vibrato happening.
okay. And so we have a question from the chat about this. This one could be elaborated a lot on. What would it take to have more people of color interested in classical music and performing in orchestras?
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to keep plugging this away because I want this to go nationwide. The untold legacies of Black composers. We have several organizations that's received a lot of funding over the last, I'll say 40 years, because there's been several orchestras that have had the diversity scholarships, like a 2-year thing in major orchestras. I forget what it's called, like a fellow that goes, you know. There's another study that's out there by the League of American Orchestras that shows that that hasn't really had any impact. Then you have organizations, you know, like Sphinx that's been around, and they're doing what they can, but it hasn't really impacted the numbers. And like what I've noticed is that it's the history books. You know, for myself, I've had some friends that were great musicians, and they just didn't feel a connection after a while, after studying and after going through undergrad, to really pursue, you know, the orchestral performance or the classical music performance thing. Just didn't feel connected to it. You know, imagine how wonderful it would be, at least for someone like me, you know, when I'm studying and I'm learning about Mozart, and then I also learn about this composer of African descent that was actually several years older than Mozart. I don't know if it's 15 years older or something, that composed a lot of works before Mozart, had influence on Haydn, you know, and just all these things that are just missing. I mean, I always tell people that right now the way music history is taught is the equivalent of teaching American history and leaving out Abraham Lincoln and leaving out Martin Luther King and leaving out Frederick Douglass. That's exactly what's happening. And
Hmm.
I think once we get that changed on a large scale, we're going to see the younger generation really feeling more connected. You're going to see, you know, and that in turn has an effect both on stage, backstage, and in the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just tell from my experience, I was trained in a conservatory. I graduated over 10 years ago. And the first time I'd ever heard of the composer Florence Price was 3 years ago. A student was playing it at a university concerto competition where I was teaching in New Jersey. I had never heard of George Walker before this. I had only heard of Joseph Boulogne recently when people started to post more about Black composers. I had just heard on the radio Samuel Coleridge Taylor, incredible piece of music. He was a very prolific composer, and I heard one single movement orchestral piece I'd never heard before, and it was brilliant. And like I said, I had never heard of these composers, having gone through a whole conservatory track of training. And you're right, that needs to change. So,
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I mean, some of these guys, they have Nathaniel Dett, and I mean, there's a long list, but
mhm.
like Florence Price, her stuff was played by major orchestras, but it seems like there was a quick interest, and then it just at that time people said, wait, what are we doing? We shouldn't be doing that. It's strange. Like, you know, if you have your work performed and premiered by a major symphony and it gets good reviews, you'd think that, you know, it would catch on, but things got,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's amazing because her music, she wrote her music after the composer like Dvorak. Dvorak came to this country and he basically was uh, trying to appropriate spirituals from African Americans. He writes a piece and it becomes world famous. Leonard Bernstein argues that he hears a lot of Czech influence in it as well, but you can't escape that if you're a Czech composer. But he comes and appropriates this music, and we play that, and then somebody like Florence Price, who can take those genuinely from her there in her blood, obviously, and she expresses that in orchestral music, and we're more interested in Dvorak's version of it than her version. It's just and yeah, I think it's time to change that. So, go if you're on YouTube watching now, we are providing you a link below of a video about Ovation concerts. We'll give you a link to, is it ovationconcerts.com?
.org,
Sorry.
ovationconcerts.org. Yeah.
Okay, ovationconcerts.org. The link below will send you to one of the video interviews, and yeah, we all need to do our part to get the word out about this. Let me see if we have any questions in the chat. Somebody asks if Anybody in your family are musicians?
Yeah. It's in the DNA. It's in the red and white blood cells. And yeah, my dad, my late father, was a brass musician and an organist at the church. My mom played a little piano. She sings actively in our church choir. My older brother is a cornet slash trumpet player. Um, Not professionally, but he probably could have been. He had a great sound. I have a younger half brother in Florida that's a pastor, but he sings, plays piano, plays brass instruments also. So yeah, it's ingrained in our DNA for some reason.
Hmm. And somebody asked, we touched on it a little, but when you decided to go professional, what was the first kind of step you took? Was it now it's time to go to a conservatory? Now it's time to what was the first kind of concrete steps you started to take to say now I'm going to be a professional?
Yeah. So I feel like I mean I was kind of up in the air when I was doing my undergrad. Had a lot of encouragement to just go straight to trying to be a professional, but I ended up doing a MBA first,
Wow.
and then worked um, in the non-musical field for a little bit. But then again, that story that I told with the Shostakovich Macbeth thing, um, kind of steered me in the direction of stirring up the passion, basically, to go pro. And
Yeah.
yeah, I after that concert, Joseph Alessi told me to check out his summer was it Alessi seminar that he had.
Okay.
So that was the first thing, and then I decided to go back to school to do my master's in orchestral performance, and that's where I started taking it really seriously, to try and get that discipline, that focus that's needed. Um, so yeah, did that answer the question? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody asks, does Ovation Concerts accept donations? And if so, where can we go to give those?
Yes. What I would just ask is this website is being redesigned right now. Just the landing page is up there, but there is an email address and a subscription thing. So if you want to just shoot us your email once the site is fully launched within the next 4 days. I think by the end of this week, I think it should be up to go. But yeah, we certainly do accept donations. Um, it's just the site got hacked a few months ago,
Oh,
and we're fortifying it now. So yeah.
okay. All right, great. Well, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you. It's been a joy to hear you playing. It sounds incredible. Somebody commented that Schumann sounds it's incredible how well it works for trombone, as you mentioned. So we really enjoyed this. I know the Island Symphony. We're grateful to have you participate in this, and we'll have to leave it there for today. And the website is ovationconcerts.org. There will be a video link below in the YouTube, and there's one on the Island Symphony Orchestra's Facebook page. And that'll be all for today. I would like to invite everybody to our next in the Artist for Artist series, which will take place on Tuesday, December 1st at 4 p.m. Stay tuned for that and keep an eye on the Island Symphony Orchestra's Facebook page and our website if there are any updates to that. And we will see you all next time.